That is, we say that it's part of the theory, okay? And it's part of understanding this theory as a serious scientific hypothesis in the first place, that we're in the epoch of initial relaxation from the moment of the past hypothesis. Isn't there going to be a similar approach available here, or if not, why not, or what do you think about all this?
So yes, those are all very good questions, and so I'll plead guilty to being overly glib. That's easy for me to do. But I don't completely agree, not because I disagree, but because some things I don't yet quite have a definite opinion. So let me restate what I stated and then try to put it in this context. So I said, if the Boltzmann brane scenario were true, I shouldn't call it the Boltzmann brane scenario. If the eternal thermal fluctuating Boltzmann-Lucretia scenario were true, okay, if we were small fluctuations on equilibrium, then we can make a prediction that when we walk outside, we should see thermal equilibrium. I actually think that's true. I actually think that if this scenario were true, and we were given all the data we have now, then we should be able to say when we walk outside, because we're assuming the scenario is true, we should see thermal equilibrium. But the criticism is that that doesn't actually falsify this scenario, because it is true that when we walk outside, we should see thermal equilibrium, most likely. But when we walk outside and don't see thermal equilibrium in this scenario, there are a lot more instances where we fluctuated into not seeing equilibrium than there are situations where the entropy really was lower in the past and we have a whole universe around us. So so it's true that the theory predicts thermal equilibrium outside, but it's not finding that result doesn't falsify the theory. So I think all that is correct. Yet, I don't want to say that therefore this scenario is not a respectable scientific hypothesis, because it might be right. I can write down the equations. It's well formed as a model of the world. And so, but it seems, under the logic we just gave, to be a non-falsifiable model of the world. We can never, not only can we never rule it out by those kinds of methods, but we can't ever accept it either, because the laws that, all the reasoning and the evidence that we would think allowed us to accept it was probably false and just randomly fluctuated into our brains. So I think maybe we need a new category for models that I can write down that seem perfectly well formed, and yet whether or not they are true, I could never possibly accept them.
I'm not sure what you mean by well-formed here. I mean, there isn't anything ill-formed. The fact that equations get involved here doesn't seem crucial. There isn't anything particularly ill-formed in the sense that it's inexplicit or something like that about the claim that the universe, together with our memories, was created 5 minutes ago. Right. Or that life is a dream, or that I don't know what. Okay, that's right, and it is precisely in the nature of these things as successful skeptical scenarios that it's a feature of them that at least it's apparently the case that for all we know they could be true. Okay, what isn't the case about them is that they allow us to tell a story of how inhabitants of the universe they describe could come to have good reasons for believing them to be true. Okay? Well, that's part of what we want out of a scientific theory, I take it.
Well, so what do we do? I'm going to now ask the question. So what do we do?
In the face of skeptical scenarios?
No, what do we do in the face of the idea that our observations of our local universe have led us to the scenario that predicts this?
But I don't understand. They couldn't have led us to that, because on this scenario they never occurred. They lead us to different scenarios. They lead us to statistical mechanics with a past hypothesis. Or they lead us to your restless multiverse hypothesis, if that's going to work out, or something like that. This isn't what they lead us to.
Well,
so, I mean, unless what you mean by lead us to is this is an idea that came up in somebody's head. If you mean they led us to this by some respectable scientific route, it's just not true that they did. Okay? Because people somewhere along this route ought to have reflected, if they were behaving in a scientifically respectable way, that this picture undermines the very, undermines the reliability of the very evidence that we cite in its favor.
No, so I get, what I'm asking is, this is, I'm claiming, the model that most cosmologists think is true.
Right.
Do you agree that we can disagree with them? Can we
agree-
say that
we
they're
can-
wrong?
I must not be understanding the question, so I'll take the bait.
Could
Yeah,
be.
sure.
We've derived the, under the assumption
Yeah.
that our memories and our records are reliable.
Right.
And so we say, okay, I can put together a picture of
But
the
that
universe.
assumption is equivalent to the assumption that we're within the initial relaxation time.
Exactly.
Okay.
So we start under the assumption that we're here,
Right,
and we derive some parameters that we fit into a
Right.
theory, and we think that theory is right.
right.
But then we realize later that that theory predicts that most people like us are here.
I don't understand, no, those aren't people like us. Those aren't people in a similar epistemic position to the one we take ourselves to be in.
Well, all
The
of
only way to come to believe this theory in a way that's stable is for it in some sense to be a part of the theory that we locate ourselves within the relaxation.
Exactly. So that's, I guess that's what I'm getting at. Is there any justification for saying, this is our universe and we're here?
Right.
That's my question. So let me put it more explicitly.
Yeah.
There was a paper by Jim Hartle and Mark Fednicki
Right.
called "Are We Typical?" And they said, look, we have this idea when we think about what they call large universes, where many, many things happen, even larger than the universe that we can see, that we would like to talk about the probabilities of observing different features of our universe. And typically to do that, we have to make some assumption about what kinds of instances we are in the universe. So we might say that we are a typical intelligent observer. And they say, well, that clearly can't be right. Because what if, there were a trillion intelligent observers on a planet around Alpha Centauri? Then we are not a typical observer.
What is
There's more-
intelligent, but what is, oh, I'm sorry, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So, I'll ask the question later.
So
Okay.
basically what they're saying is that if you make this assumption that we are typical observers in the universe, you're not being humble about us, we're just typical, you're actually granting yourself a huge amount of leverage over the rest of the universe that says that typical observers are like us. So that, you can rule out all sorts of things you shouldn't be able to rule out. So therefore they claim that the right way to deal with scenarios like this is to say the theory is consistent with the data as long as there exist in this ensemble observers like us. And therefore we cannot rule out this theory. We should accept this theory and just say, and we live here.
Right.
Do you think that's a scientifically respectable attitude?
I mean, look, no, I'm quite confused about this. I'm quite confused about this myself. But look, maybe here are some at least preliminary points to get on the table. The claim that we are Boltzmann brain isn't a claim that's in some straightforward empirical sense observationally false. That's just the point, okay? Rather, it's that it puts us in some weird position vis-a-vis our reasons for having confidence in the theory that predicted that in the first place, okay? So, there's only one location along here when certain Kantian transcendental conditions of sort of being in reflective equilibrium are satisfied. Those are toward the beginning. Okay, I don't know what to make of that. Okay, that's a good. It certainly is. It certainly seems wrong to say. It certainly seems wrong to say something as quick as, look, the trouble with this theory. Well, let me put it this way. What's the difference between the move of saying it's among the posits of this theory that we're near the relaxation point, and the move of saying just in the first place it's among the posits of the theory that there's a past hypothesis? Do those strike you as different?
They do, and
How so?
yeah, so I think the question is, another way of saying the question is, when we have